good thing. So I don't want to be repetitive and give you guys a bunch of information that that would be superfluous to you. So let me go over a couple things and then I'll ask you guys questions about what you want to know further. For starters, let's talk a little bit about the volcano itself that we're standing on top of right now. So you guys have all seen this, right, where the caldera from the last eruption 640,000 years ago is sort of in the center of the park. It's about a third of the area of the park, 35 miles by 45 miles, so real massive caldera. This is the largest caldera on a continent in the world. So there may be larger ones underneath the ocean, but this is the largest continental caldera in the world that exists. And this one is actually relatively small compared to the one from 2.1 million years ago. This volcanic caldera really shapes everything, both geologically and ecologically, in the area. And you guys are probably already familiar with this, but you've got the molten magma about 3 to 6 miles beneath the surface here, and that's the hot spot. That's the volcano itself. And that's, of course, what's causing all of our geologic phenomenon that's happening here. It's coming, a plume of magma is coming right up and hitting us here about 3 miles beneath the surface. So we're at one of the closest spots here. And it changes everything. It changes the rocks that are here, it changes the water that's here, it changes what can grow here and what can live here. So for starters, most of the rock that you're going to find on and around the caldera is rhyolite. Have you guys seen this yet? You have seen the rhyolite before? Okay. So I'll pass it around if you guys want to take another look. So the rhyolite, you guys know why it's different from other volcanic rock? Then, what is it?
Pasty.
It's a really cool word. Silicious. It's silicious. It's got a bunch of silica in it. So it's very thick. So if we have a lava flow here in Yellowstone, and of course all these ridges here are lava flows, it's a little bit different from the lava flows in, say, Hawaii, for example, which are basaltic flows. Those flows are like honey running down a table. Our flow is like peanut butter. It's really chunky, it's really thick, and it's filled with silica. Because it's filled with silica, it's super porous, and so when it breaks down and creates soil, that soil's really porous. If you have porous soil, you don't get nutrients, right? You've got like a colander. So you've got an open hand instead of a closed hand. And so the nutrients don't remain in the soil, which means that what can grow on top of this volcano is deeply affected by the fact that that's our soil. So that's why 80% of every tree, so 4 out of 5 of every single tree in this park is a lodgepole pine, and that's what all these are. This is a specific kind of tree that grows in the Rocky Mountains and along the coast, the Pacific coast. That's it. Those are the only places it grows in the world. And this tree loves poor soil, bad nutrients. It doesn't thrive. If you were to give this tree a bunch of fertilizer and miracle grow, it would just die. So it loves that really poor soil. And so as a result, Yellowstone is covered in this kind of tree. Well, that has a lot of different effects ecologically too. Because it's covered in this kind of tree, this is a fire-adapted tree. So this is an area that can handle fire and it burns all the time. Because it's covered in this kind of tree, we end up with these really thick, shaded out forest bottoms. And so that changes what kind of animals can live in certain areas. And so all of these ecological effects kind of are like a domino on the geology. Now, some of the other geology in the area is the thermal features themselves, and they make an effect on the landscape as well. For starters, they create these big open areas. So here in the upper Geyser Basin, you've got trees everywhere, and then in the middle you've got these big open areas. And the big open areas are places where trees can't grow because the hot water is killing them. You guys have probably seen some dead trees down at West Thumb. There's some center trees or some dead trees, and those are dead because of the thermal features. These big open areas then become a haven for wildlife, especially in the wintertime. So bison and elk in particular will come to these places and they will graze here because not only are they open and have grass, but they don't have snow. So I was telling you guys that I live here year round and that we have about 10 feet of snow on average where I live. There's no way that you can deal with 10 feet of snow if you were a bison, because they only eat grass. And so as a result, they need to seek shelter in places where they can actually get to the grass, but they can in a geyser basin because it's hot. The ground is hot. They can actually, there's no snow on top of the geyser basin. So we would be in the wintertime, the snow would be about here. We'd be standing on top of it, but there'd be no snow right there where the ground is hot. And so they seek shelter. So there's another ecologic consequence. Have you guys seen this stuff? So the rock I handed you was an igneous rock. That was rhyolite. What is this? What do you think, just looking at it?
Is that pumice?
It's not pumice. That's a really good guess, though. It sort of has the consistency. I'll pass it around for you guys to feel. It has the consistency of pumice. It's light like pumice. It's not pumice, though. First of all, do you think it's igneous, metamorphic, or sedimentary?
Sedimentary.
Okay, sedimentary. Why do you think that?
Because it has like layers in it.
Because it has layers, right? It's laid down. It is a sedimentary rock. It is. And it's made completely, almost entirely of silica. And what happens is that the silica comes out of the granite, the rhyolite, the pieces of the Earth's crust with hot water. So every time that Old Faithful or any of these other geysers in the park erupts, they're bringing hot water. That hot water has dissolved pieces of silica in it, sort of like salt and seawater. Those dissolved pieces of silica lay down in layers, and that's why you have a sedimentary rock here, and form this stuff, and we call it siliceous sinter. And this is the stuff that you see in all the geyser basins. This is why everything is white. This is why you have cones around geysers. So you guys saw fishing cone yesterday. Fishing cone has this wonderful cone. It's all made of this stuff, this siliceous sinter. And it's deposited one little tiny microscopic minuscule piece of sand or silica at a time. And it actually can take 100 years for just a couple centimeters. So it takes a very, very long time for this stuff to build up. It's a very slow process, and it happens each time there's an eruption. And so when you go to a geyser basin like this one or like West Thumb, it's covered in this white stuff, whether it's solid surface or whether there's a lot of places at West Thumb where it's very sandy. It's all the same stuff. It's all this siliceous sinter. Nothing can really grow in this stuff. There are a few grasses, a few flowers that can manage to grow in this stuff, but you're never going to have a really rich environment inside of a geyser basin because of it. And so that definitely has an effect on the ecology as well. Finally, in a geyser basin, you've got the thermophiles, and I'm sure that Ranger Brian talked to you guys about those, right? So those are the microorganisms that live in and around all the hot springs and geysers, and there are many kinds of, there's 400 kinds that we know of right now. And this is kind of interesting to me. They say that we've discovered 1%. I don't know how do you know that? How do you know what we've discovered? Whatever. The point is there's probably thousands of different kinds of thermophiles that live in Yellowstone, and this is one of the few places in the world that they live. They also live in other geyser basins, like in Russia, the peninsula in Russia, like in New Zealand. But here in Yellowstone, since we have most of the world's thermal features, we also have most of the world's thermophiles. And as a result, this is a really important place for research, for folks like NASA who are looking for life on other planets. And that life is going to be extreme. It's going to look like this stuff looks, these thermophiles look. So we have a lot of things that are happening here ecologically because of the volcano.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's just kind of a brief overview. A lot of that you guys have already heard. I want to hear some questions from you guys and stuff that questions you have that you haven't had answered, or you haven't had answered completely, and see if we can stump the ranger. Tell you a little stump the ranger. You guys are not awake yet, are you? Did you not have your tea?
Is there any way, like in the past, where the landscape here has changed? Because what I mean is that at West Thumb, they'd like to make way for a road. They'd moved a funeral. And I'm not just thinking about like purposefully moving something, but has there like been any way where you sort of see like new things?
Yes, that's a really great question. So you guys are at West Thumb, which is where I spend my winters. So I'm intimately familiar with that geyser basin, and it has this crazy history, right? Where people did all these things to the geyser basin, and then at one point the Park Service said, we need to leave it alone, and ripped it all out, right? And the roadside fumarole is a really great example. We actually altered the feature to meet our needs, right? This geyser basin has had a lot of that kind of history too. In fact, people have been sort of messing with this geyser basin since the late 1870s.
Wow.
And it has a very rich history of that. For starters, over in that corner over there, there used to be a bathhouse. Now this is very strictly against anything that we would ever do in the National Park Service today. But in the 1870s, National Park Service didn't exist. There was nobody looking out, and somebody said, hey, I bet that water's really great. So one of the things that we did that's kind of similar to the fumarole over at West Thumb is that, I shouldn't say we, I should say they. My ancestors technically weren't here yet. So they took some water from a feature up on that hill, and I'm trying to see if you can see it steaming this morning. Sometimes you can see the steam in the trees over there, if it seems like it's totally out of place. And there's a little feature up there, it's called Solitary Geyser. And what they did was they took water from Solitary and they piped it down the hill and all the way over to right over here by the inn. And in the process of piping it down, it cooled off. So that was how they were able to cool the water off. They pumped it into a bathhouse, which was a little building that stood over there, and they charged people 50 cents. And you could go in and take a bath in Yellowstone's thermal water. Well, that did a lot of things. First of all, they're putting a pipe through a geyser basin, and there are even places where you can see it sticking out today. We're afraid to remove it because of the damage that it will do, but you can see it out there today. The other thing is they ruined that particular geyser. It no longer functioned the way that it used to. Its water level dropped. Today it erupts pretty frequently and has little small eruptions. Another thing that they did was they had a road that ran right here. And so if you were to walk this path all the way to Morning Glory, this paved path that goes this way, that was the road. So much like at West Thumb, where the road went right through the geyser basin, the main Grand Loop Road did the same thing here. It went all the way out to Morning Glory and then met up with the same road. Today that's a walking or bicycling path only. You're not allowed to drive a vehicle on that. But there were some consequences to that. First of all, people would park their cars right where we're standing to watch Old Faithful, and sometimes even further up and even closer. So a lot of damage was done to the center formations around Old Faithful. People would drive right past Castle Geyser. Castle Geyser is one of the oldest geysers in the park. We know that because it has this massive 14-foot formation of that slowly building silica around it. And as a result, because people could get so close to it, they would go chunk pieces of it off. They thought it was pretty. So they would chunk off these pieces, and today Castle Geyser is very smooth on one side. It's essentially been vandalized. Past that, you get to Morning Glory Pool. Morning Glory Pool was once one of the most famous pools in all of Yellowstone. It was Old Faithful, Morning Glory, and Fishing Cone. I mean, those were the three most famous things in this park in the late 1800s. And what happened in Morning Glory is that people could get so close to it that they would drop things into it. Coins, handkerchiefs, apparently unmentionables, bottles, that's my favorite, I don't know what that's all about. Bottles, cans, and as a result, Morning Glory wasn't as hot. Because it wasn't as hot, different thermophiles grew in it. It's not as pretty today as it once was. So you guys saw black